Well, hello, and a big theatrical welcome to you. I am so excited today because I have a guest. Yes, I have a guest from the UK, a very special guest because he is one of my favorite children's authors. He is an illustrator, a writer. He has published over 20 books worldwide, and he is probably most well known and famous for his series of books. I'm going to tell you which books now, which have sold over 1 million copies in the whole of the world. Now, the character that I'm talking about, you may well know him. He's black and white, he's fluffy, he's a little bit grumpy, but very polite, and he's such a lovable character. It is, of course, Mr. Panda. And I have with us today now the author of Mr. Panda, Steve Antony. So without further ado, drum roll, let me introduce you to Steve Antony right now, who is joining us from the UK. Let me see. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Miranda, and hi to everyone watching. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Miranda.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Steve. It is such a privilege because, as you know, I am a big fan. Me, as well as all my students, as well as loads of teachers worldwide, are such a big fan of the Mr. Panda series. And he's such a lovable character. And I have so many questions. I'm so curious about you, your writing, everything, and about Mr. Panda. So I just want to dive in and ask you, I hope not too personal questions. I mean, anything you don't want to answer, please feel free not to answer. But I'm just very curious about everything. So my first question is, with Mr. Panda, what actually inspired you to write about a panda and donuts? I mean, what really did inspire you?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, you know, you're absolutely right. Mr. Panda he's a bit grumpy, but he's very polite. He is holding a tray of donuts, as you can see on the cover of Please Mr Panda. So I have a bit of a sweet tooth. So I love donuts. And I also like drawing animals. So one day I was drawing pandas in my sketchbook, happily drawing pandas. And one of the pandas that I drew looked a little bit deadpan, a little bit grumpy, you know, and I wondered what's going through that panda's mind. And that's the really great thing about storytelling and making up your own stories, is you can create a drawing and then you want to find out more about that character that you've just drawn. So I drew Mr. Panda and I thought to myself, okay, he looks like he should be holding something. So I gave him some donuts because I love donuts. I know it sounds a bit random, but that's how these things sometimes start. So it started off with a drawing, and then from that drawing came the very first Mr. Panda story.
So really, from the illustration, from your illustrations, that is how your stories are born, not actually the story first and then the illustrations, the other way around.
Yeah, interestingly enough, it usually is that way around. It's usually the drawing, and I want to find out more about the drawing. So in the case of Mr. Panda, I wanted to know why he was holding donuts, why he looked a little bit grumpy, and then came the story. And I started writing the story. Mr. Panda is generously giving away his donuts, but for some reason, he keeps changing his mind. So, for example, in the first book, Please Mr. Panda, which is all about saying please, a penguin comes along and says, give me the pink donut, give me the pink one. But Mr. Panda doesn't respond very well to bad manners. So he walks off without really explaining to the penguin why he's walked off. And of course, we discover it's because he's just waiting for one of the animals to remember to use the magic word. And that's really how that came about. So I didn't sit down and think, I'm going to write a book about saying please. I started writing the story, and as I was writing it, it then dawned on me that this could be a book about saying please. And that's where, and then that's you know, that's how this book was born, and I came up with the title Please Mr Panda.
Well, that's really fascinating, actually, because a lot of people think, well, maybe it's usually the story that comes first and then the illustrations after. And please, I think, is just so apt, especially for language teachers who are teaching young language learners, because please is often neglected a little bit when you're teaching young kids English as a second language, because it's not one of the words that comes naturally to young language learners. So please is very useful. And the fact that your books also use a lot of repetition as well is really, really useful for language teaching too. But where did you actually learn how to illustrate? Did you learn at school? Did you learn after school? Did you have a great teacher at school who actually taught you all of the ropes? You know, how did it come about? How did you learn?
I did have some really great teachers, art teachers, and I remember all of their names. Mrs. Adams, for example, she taught me art when I was 13. I was raised in the States, so I was born here. I was born here in the UK, but my family moved over to New Mexico. So, I may say things like fourth grade, fifth grade class because I was raised in the States. That's where I received most of my education. She was my sixth grade art teacher, I think. But I've always loved to draw. You know, ever since I was a 4 or 5 year old, I've always loved to draw. And I know that many people watching this, if there are any children watching this, or any educators watching this, you know, drawing and just allowing yourself to express how you feel through art is a really great thing to do, because you know from that exercise comes all sorts of wonderful things. It's a great way to solve problems. It's a great way to express yourself. It's a great way to tell stories. So for me, it was almost like a form of escapism too. So I would escape into my world of drawings, and because I kept doing it, I just got a bit better at it. You know, I kept on drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing and making up stories, and you know, I really wanted to be an artist when I was a young child. I didn't quite know how that would manifest. You know, what sort of artist? It's quite a broad term, you know, because in many ways we're all creators. We all create. We can all be creative in different ways. But I particularly liked to be creative with you know, crayons and paper. And I carried on doing that, and here I am doing it.
Still doing it. So you didn't start off saying, yes, I want to be an artist for you know, a particular artist. You didn't, or dream about thinking, oh yeah, I want to be an illustrator for kids' books. It just kind of evolved from your experience. You know, you didn't kind of make a conscious decision, yes, I want to be a children's illustrator.
I think what I realized quite early on in life is that art is universal. And I remember thinking that when I was maybe 11, 12, 13 years old. And when I say universal, I mean that it doesn't matter what language you speak. We can, you know, most of us can read pictures. And it's just a great way of almost expressing how you feel about the world and what's happening around you, or what's happening in your own life. And it's something that most people will understand, because it's sometimes hard to articulate how you feel. And I would imagine, especially if you're a young child learning a new language, a second language, it can be quite difficult. And I think that's why picture books make it a little bit easier, you know, to learn a new language, or just to learn language in general.
No, and this is, you know, as I was saying to you before, this another thing that I really love about your books for teaching English to young children who it's not their first language, is because your illustrations are just so clear. They're self-explanatory, really, and your text is so brief as well, and so repetitive, and in a really good way, that children find it really, really easy to both understand the story and to it becomes like an active experience for children, because they can speak along with the story. They can narrate the story with the teacher, because the text is just so short and so repetitive and so easy to learn and memorize. And this is another thing that I love about your illustrations and your text. It's just not overly so I'm just trying to show a few of your wonderful illustrations there. They're just so it's self-explanatory. They're absolutely wonderful. But talking about your cat, sorry, I keep going on about Mr. Panda because I just love him. But
carry on, Adelaide.
But what about when you're creating your characters for your books? Do you kind of put a voice to them? Do you give them a voice? You know, when you're illustrating, when you're writing them, are you quite theatrical in the sense that you kind of say, "Oh, right, I'm going to have Mr. Panda is going to speak with a very low voice"? I don't know. Do you do that, or do you just kind of draw and write and you just have the voices in your mind, but maybe you don't express them? What's your process?
I love that. I definitely have the voices in my mind. I definitely imagine how they will sound. I'm naturally not an outgoing person. I was a really shy child, so I'm not so great at performing. I mean, I certainly don't feel like I'm that good at performing. As I said, I'm not an outgoing person. So but I would give. So if I think it's, with books, with picture books in particular, you can have what I have discovered being an author that does events is the difference between reading a picture book to a big group of children and reading a picture book to one or two, say, family members.
Okay.
And I know that some adults feel a bit self-conscious when they're reading a book in front of a big group of children and they're making up voices. And I know some adults love that, but I know others feel a bit awkward about it. But when you're reading it to your child, for example, or to your nephew or niece, then I think that's when I feel a bit more comfortable, kind of really going for it with the voices. During the first lockdown last year, I think it was the first UK lockdown last year. So that was back in March. I noticed that Please Mr. Panda, well, mainly Please Mr. Panda, because there are now 8 books in the Mr. Panda series, but mainly Please Mr. Panda was being uploaded to YouTube, readings of the story uploaded every 3 to 4 hours, which was just insane. It was great. It was really great to see. And it was really interesting to see how people read the book. Some people really go for it and they really give those characters voices. So I went ahead and uploaded a video of me reading the book. But there are some far more entertaining other people reading Please Mr. Panda.
But I think what you're saying is like, it's very, very interesting when you're reading on a one-to-one level, especially if you're reading to your child or your nephew or your niece, you do let yourself go a lot more. And when you're reading in front of like a whole class, for example, of children, you can feel a little bit intimidated by it. But I think that, being theatrical, that your characters are so inviting, you just cannot not give Mr. Panda, one of the voices. It just is like screaming, yes. Give me that voice, give me a voice.
Yeah, I imagine. Do you know? You may know this. I don't know. So Mr. Panda is being developed into a cartoon right now, so which is super exciting. Wonderful. So one of the things that we have spoken about are the voices. Who would be great? Who pops into your head when who would you want to be Mr. Panda? And I don't know if I'm actually sort of allowed to mention any names or anything, but I'm interested to know, can you think of it? Like, who would you does anyone pop into your head straight away? Like, who do you think would be a great Mr. Panda voice? I will say this.
Goodness. Yeah.
When I was first asked that question, the first person that came to mind was Bill Murray.
Definitely.
Just because of in his delivery, he sometimes can sound quite kind of a little bit deadpan and kind of disinterested.
Yes. No, definitely. I think he would be excellent, absolutely
Yes.
excellent to do it. Yeah, really, really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's got to be like a simple voice that is just not too over the top, too theatrical. It's got to be like very calm and collective. Yeah, definitely. Bill
Yes.
Murray could be a different option there. So what about when you're writing books, when you're writing and you're illustrating, how many hours a day would you normally spend? Well, instead of saying how many hours a day, how long would it take you to write a book? For example, one of your Mr. Panda books, or any other book that you've written, because you've written more than 20. How long does it actually take you to write a book? Does it take you days, weeks, months, years?
Well, that's a good question. Writing a story doesn't necessarily need to take that long. I mean, and some people assume that writing a story must take a long time. I mean, others assume that it doesn't take very long at all. It depends on what it is you want to say. So Please Mr Panda seemed to flow through me quite naturally, and I actually came up with this story, which essentially is dialogue. As you know, it's Mr Panda speaking to the other animals. It's all written in dialogue. It didn't take that long. I would say it only took me about, and this sounds like a really short amount of time, and it is. It took me about half an hour to come up with it.
No, I
which
thought
is
you were going to
crazy.
say it took me about a year and a half. No, it took me
No,
half an
I
hour.
think but it took much longer to illustrate it. Now, here's the
Okay.
interesting thing: the sequels, they never take half an hour. I mean, thank you, Mr. Panda, which seems like a pretty obvious title, doesn't it, for a sequel? Thank you, Mr. Panda. We've got Please, Mr. Panda. So, Thank You, Mr. Panda was the third book. Well, the second was I'll Wait, Mr. Panda. So that took a bit longer than Please, Mr. Panda. The third was Thank You, Mr. Panda. Now, believe it or not, took me about 2 months to write. When I say the word write, I don't literally mean writing out the words. I mean coming up with the flow and the rhythm and the pace, because you've got so many pages in a picture book, and with the Mr. Panda series, there are some things I feel that need to feature in each of the books. So of course, Mr. Panda needs to feature. I feel that the lemur needs to be in the penguin, because they to me have become Mr. Panda's closest friends. So I feel like they need to appear in every book. I feel there needs to be humor. That's really important. But I feel there needs to be some kind of punchline also, as well as a lesson in manners. So there are quite a few things there to incorporate into what essentially appears to be a very simple piece of text. And that can
It's so
be
true.
quite difficult. The first one, Please Mr. Panda, came through quite naturally because I wasn't thinking really about what it is I wanted to say. I was just having fun with this character. But the others, I think I created it with a bit more intention, and sometimes that can take a while,
No, definitely.
write. And illustrating it takes longer. Illustrating a book can take anything between a month to 3 months. In some cases, illustrating a book can take up to a year, depending on how incredibly detailed it is. The Mr. Panda books, they're not that detailed, so thankfully they don't take me that long to illustrate.
But they're beautifully made, and I love the fact that you say that an important feature for you when you are writing books and illustrating books is the humor, and that's something that I always like to say to teachers as well, that humor in the English language classroom is just so important with books, with whatever you're doing, and that element of surprise as well, as you were saying before. With your book, with the like kind of the punchline, the ending of the book, that element of surprise and humor, it really does help engage children of all ages. And this is what I love about your books, is that they are suitable for children of all ages, because it's so relatable, it's so simple, but it doesn't treat children like little tiny children. It's suitable also for older children who wouldn't find it childish at all. I mean, I just love the panda books, and can't say enough about them. But also, I'm curious about you. So you're telling us about how long it would actually write and illustrate books. But do you have like a routine when you're illustrating and writing at home or in your studio? Do you have like some things that you've got to have your routine, like everything all set out in a particular way, or a certain type of music on that gives you kind of inspiration? Or do you have something that helps your creative juices?
You know, I do. I mean, I think, I mean, I don't know whether I don't know whether I have a list of things that absolutely I need to have in order to be creative. But there are some things that I just do instinctively. For example, I like to listen to relaxing music when I'm creating, and preferably music without words, because that can distract me. So that can be like relaxing music. It can be classical music. It can be panpipes. Just anything that's quite nice to listen to have in the background. And I find that I'm more creative when I have space. So space in my head and space around me. So if I've got like a list of things I need to do, errands to run, I have to do those first before I sit down, because I need a chunk of time. I need a chunk, at least an hour or two of time, to actually allow myself to get into that creative frame of mind. And sometimes I just need to clear my space as well. I'm not an incredibly tidy person, and I don't think I'm incredibly messy either, but I like things to be neat and not too chaotic, because that I find that distracting. So I try to sort of find a nice space for me to be, and to just let my imagination do its thing, you know. And I think we all have a preferred space. I think, you know, some of us like to be outside, or some people like to go for a walk, and they find that helps to get their creative juices flowing. It's different for everybody. It really is. But I think for me, I think having that breathing space, no matter where you are, is really important. That space to breathe, and to just, and almost to not think, almost just to sort of not think too hard. just enjoy the space, and just, I know it sounds a little bit kind of, but you know, but just to enjoy the space, and let the ideas come to you, because that does happen if you just quiet your mind and get rid of all of that clutter.
Which isn't easy, is it? It's just like trying to get rid of all that clutter and everything. But what is interesting, what you're saying, is about what I find fascinating is the music. You can't listen to music that has words. So there's no heavy metal or rock bands for you.
No.
You've got to definitely have music that kind of really calms your mind, that is not distracting, which that's very, very interesting. I'll have to try that actually.
But the thing is, the trouble is, it can't be too relaxing, otherwise I'll fall asleep. That does happen quite often.
That's my problem. Not too relaxing.
Sometimes I randomly select videos on YouTube. Like, I will search for relaxing videos, and I might then unknowingly select a relaxing piece of music that also has the subliminal messages in the back. You know, the kind where I have the sort of, you know,
now you are falling asleep.
Actually staying you to sleep. So yeah, I find relaxing music, and I find music with words does distract me, because the words, especially when I'm trying to think of words, or I'm trying to come up with a story, the words in the song, they just distract me, and it's different for everybody. I mean, other people wouldn't find that to be, you know, a problem, but for me, it just has to be completely wordless music.
No, that's really fascinating. I'm going to have to try and do that the next time I write my next book. I'm writing all of these tips down from you now. You know, if for example, if you were to give, I'm going to go on to another thing in a moment, but if you were to give advice to any English language teacher out there who was thinking of writing their own story book, or with illustrations, what have you, for their own students, or what advice would you give them to start off writing? Is there any really big tip that you think that would be quite useful for teachers out there?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's okay. So if you were to ask or encourage or try to encourage a child to write their own story or come up with their own character by saying something like, right, just think of a character and start writing a story. That's far too, that's not, I don't think that's going to work, because you need to give them a prompt. I feel like they need something to start from to get their creative juices flowing. So what I sometimes do, and I do deliver quite a few story building workshops, what I will sometimes do is encourage the child to use their, or adult, to use their senses, all of their senses, all of their senses, to become more aware of their surroundings and to find inspiration from their surroundings. So what they see, what they hear, what they touch, what they can feel, or even what they taste. You know, if they've just had, I don't know, if you're sort of in the middle of eating, that one probably isn't so relevant. But to use their senses, and then to come up with a word without thinking too hard, to write a word. So I'm right here, and where I am now in this space, I can see a blue sky, some clouds, some plants outside. I can see a banana peel. I ate a banana just before this interview. I can see a banana peel. And I would just tell them to write down a word. Just write any word. Don't think about it too hard. Write it down, just one word. And then I take all their words and I put them into a bag or a hat or something. And then I kind of mix them all up. And then I pass the hat around, and then each child takes out a word. It isn't their, in most cases, isn't their word. And they have to come up with a character first of all, so something visual based on that word, and from that visual that they've created from that word, I then encourage them to start thinking about what story that character wants to tell, in much in the same way that I created the first Mr. Panda book, using a visual that's inspired by a word or something. So a word, visual, and then from that visual, a story can be born. And you'd be surprised, really. It always surprises me, because I've delivered that workshop so many times, and it doesn't matter if there are 10 children or 20 children. I mean, it doesn't really work for children under the age of, say, 5, like 5 or under. But for 6 and up, almost every single child in the room, by the end of that session, which is normally an hour long, will have a character, not only a character, but a title for their story, and also a synopsis or a blurb, you know, what you normally would see on the back of a, well, here we go, back of a book, you know, and then what they do is take it away and come up with a story. So that's
amazing.
That's what I do. But there are other things that you can do as well. But that's a very sort of simple way, I think.
Yeah, I think that is the most brilliant idea, because it takes away that, you know, when you have like a blank piece of paper in front of you, right, now write a story about a character, and you know, it's like the kids are looking like that. But when you actually say, okay, use the prompts, use your senses, like a multi-sensory experience, you're taking away all of the hard part of the story, and it becomes so much easier to start off. I think those are brilliant tips. Thanks for that, Steve. I'm making notes.
Well, I think that writing is almost a way, it's almost a form of problem solving. And I think the more questions you ask, the better. So Mr. Panda, why is he holding a tray of donuts? Why is he giving the donuts away? Why is he changing his mind? And from those questions can come the story. And the more questions you ask, the more story, you know, the story begins to unfold. So yes, there you have that Mr. Panda there offering the donuts to the ostrich, who doesn't want donuts.
No.
So
no.
Ostrich is the one character that really doesn't want those donuts.
No, not at all. And she will refuse to say please. All you need to do is say please. Now, I'm really, really excited because I know also you have actually 2 books, not just 1 book, but 2 books that, well, one that has already come out, that has already just been published right now, and I would like to ask you some more information about that. And then another book, which is another Mr. Panda book, which is also coming out, I believe, if I'm not wrong, in November. So, but first of all, tell us about your new book that has just come out, which is called You Can.
Oh, thank you. Yes, well, you can see here, I've got the big sort of banner thing behind me with You Can on it. So I've been doing quite a few of these sort of Zoom-ish, virtual events for this book, hence why it's behind me. So You Can was published, it published 2 days ago, 3 days ago. So October 7th in the UK, it published in hardback. So it's, I illustrated it. I didn't write this one. Now, what makes this book so interesting, and one of the reasons why I wanted to illustrate it, is because You Can is formed. It's formed by the thoughts and messages of children. So Alexandra Strick, whose name is here on the front cover, Alexandra Strick, she asked a bunch of children what they would tell their younger selves to encourage them, to inspire them, to comfort them, to perhaps give them hope. And she started doing this years and years and years ago. This book took several years to become a book. I mean, it's a lot of voices went into this. So that's how it started. And then she sent me an email, Alex sent me an email about 2.5 years ago with the text attached to the email, and she said, "Is this something you might be interested in illustrating?" So I read through it, and to me it read like a manifesto of how to live your best life, of how a child can feel empowered, and it covers so many things. It is empowering, but it also covers sadness and frustration and forgiveness and sort of all of those things that are actually quite difficult to I find they're quite difficult to tackle and to communicate in the form of a picture book, things like forgiveness. But I think because these thoughts came from children, I don't know, it's interesting how I'll just show you inside the book. So You Can, there are 14 characters in this book, 14 children, and we see them, first of all, as babies. So 14 babies. And then whenever you turn the page, the characters grow older by 1 year. So you've got that visual narrative as well as the text. So they're growing older year page by page. So they're toddlers here. So it says here, you can be brave, be beautiful, be clever, and be strong. So as the illustrator, I tried my best to come up with something visual that can communicate what that means. So for example, let's have a look at something else here. Here we go. So the characters are now about 7 years old or 8. So it says you can, here we go. You can enjoy learning, take your time, learn a different language. Bearing in mind, these came from children, these words. So I wasn't quite sure how to illustrate learn a different language, because the challenge I had was that this book could be published anywhere in the world, potentially, and published in any given language, potentially. So how am I going to illustrate learning a new language when this book, I'm here in the UK and this is right now, it's in English. What about when this book is, perhaps this book might be published in Italian? It wouldn't really work if I had learned a new language and the language was Italian here, for example, but the book is also in Italian. Do you see the sort of challenge?
Absolutely. So, it is something universal.
Yes. So I chose sign language. And
Yes,
so
of
learn a new
course.
language, so sign language, but that also presented challenges because there are different kinds of sign language, you know. So I chose I chose something that would be as universal as possible. Anyway, so have fun practicing something new. So it carries on like this, all these wonderful things, and
The
eventually we do.
illustrations are wonderful, are beautiful.
Oh, thank you. So and the children cared very deeply about climate change. So there's a little section in there on doing what we can to combat that. And anyway, they grow until they are around 18 years old. And I'll just show you the image of them when they're all 18.
It's so interesting to have the actual input in writing a book from the children themselves, actually, that they are actually
Yes.
writing the book with you, along with you. They're really contributing to it. Like, where it's amazing.
Yes.
And what better message to bring to understand also their thoughts, their emotions, their feelings, what's going on
Yes.
around in the world around them at the moment. It's so important to know that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what attracted me to illustrating this book in the first place, because it's so empowering. But not only is it empowering, it's come from the voices of children. You know, what tends to happen in the world of picture books is that children are normally the last part of the process. So as an adult that comes up with the book, adults, you know, sit around a table and they decide what would work better, like what sort of design and blah blah blah, all of this stuff, right? It's all adults, you know, all creating the book. From the sales team to the booksellers to the designer, the editor, and of course the actual author and illustrator. And the children are sort of at the end of that process. They are then given they then discover the book or are given the book to read. But with this one, it was the other way around. The children were here at the very start, you know. So that's and I think because of that,
Very original.
it's I don't know, it's the way the wording and the thoughts and the things that are on their mind, it's all very timely, but it's also timeless, and it's universal too, because these are things that I think children everywhere are, you know, are concerned with. You know, it's you know, times can be difficult at any time for a child, no matter sort of where you are, whatever your background is. You know, we all want to be seen and heard, and I feel we all need to have that feeling of empowerment, and that things are okay and that you're okay, and it's all of that. It's all kind of wrapped into one, you know, piece of text, which is really quite special.
Absolutely, very very powerful and empowering, and the title of the book as well. You can, is that to symbolize you can be anything, do anything that you want, that you put your mind to? What does that symbolize for you? That the title.
Well, you can is, I mean, it's positive. It's, you know, it's not so much you can do anything, because it doesn't actually say that. In fact, there's a line in here that says you can do almost anything else can do, even if you have to do it differently. And we can see here and now they're about 13 or 14. So there's a guide runner and a blind runner. So, and the reason that line is in there is because one of the contributors is a wheelchair user, and she said that people people tell her that you can do anything, or they say, you know, you can't really do that. Or she'll discover that something isn't accessible. She'll go somewhere and realize that, you know, she can't enter a building or something like that. So there's you can do anything, and then actually, you know, you can't do anything. And she said, oh, well, I can do most things, and I can do anything, even if I have to do it a bit differently. So when I was about 8 years old, I discovered that I'm colorblind, red-green colorblind, which I mean, I'm used to it. I don't really feel like I'm missing out on anything. I mean, yeah, sometimes it can be a bit annoying when I don't know, for example, if I'm charging something and I can't tell if the light is red or green, so I don't know whether it's charged, or if a toilet is occupied or vacant, there's red or green.
That could be quite important thing.
That has led to some slightly awkward moments. I have to knock on the door. Is anybody in?
Anybody there?
Yeah. But so it's not really a big deal. But when I was younger, I realized I was colorblind and red-green colorblind, and I didn't get the colors right. I couldn't figure out if I had the right color for the sky, the right color for the grass, and the for skin. And so I felt as if, you know, this is going to really hold me back from being an artist. You know, this is going to hold me back. How can I be an artist if I'm not entirely sure what colors I'm using, and if I keep getting it wrong? So later in life, I decided that I wouldn't think about whether the grass is green or the sky is blue or whatever. It can be any color. I mean, you can just let your imagination run wild and not even concern yourself with whether something is the color it should be or whatever. So with the Mr. Panda books, all of the characters I've chosen, all of the animals, every single one of them, and all 8 of the books are black and white.
I was about to ask you that, actually. Is that the reason why your characters are all mainly black and white? Because
it actually is.
You're colorblind.
I mean,
isn't that amazing?
Yeah, they got the illustration.
All black and white. Amazing.
And that really is the reason why, because it makes it a little bit easier for me. You know, and for me, it pops off of it sort of, it really, the contrast of the black and the white and the super bright colors that I chose for the donuts, for me, they really pop off of the page, you know.
Yeah.
And, perhaps I don't know,
very interesting.
Yeah, so I was going to say, perhaps that's why it's so appealing to babies and to toddlers, because I shortly after the first book came out, I had lots of messages saying that, you know, my baby loves this book, and, you know, my toddler loves the black and white, and I didn't even think about this. It wasn't intentional, but of course, when you're that young, you do respond more to more contrasting colors, and that's why so many sort of baby books are, you know, have those super bright colors, or in some cases are completely black and white with just a pop of color here and there. So
absolutely. But it's so strange, because I've never really thought about your books as being only in black and white. In my mind, they are really, 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 really colorful. That's the amazing thing about them. I don't think of, it's a black and white book. No, it's like full of colors, because maybe the characters are so strong. But I think what you're saying about the message about you can do almost anything, but perhaps differently, is such a strong message for that book. It's amazing. And also you have You Can, which has just launched a couple of days ago, which is absolutely fantastic. And you also have another book coming out also in November. Can you tell us what it is, who it is?
Yes,
can you
absolutely.
Maybe show us also the cover of that book as well, because I'm really excited about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll show you. So it's a Mr. Panda book. It's a new Mr. Panda book, and actually Mr. Panda's up here. You can see, right? I've got Mr. Panda's.
Yeah, he's got a beam of light on him. He's taking the limelight from you there, Steve.
He's totally taking. When we started this video, the lighting was pretty good, but it seems that Mr. Panda is now taking
completely. Yeah, he's like saying, "I want the light on me. Give me the light. Give me the light." Yeah, you're completely disappearing there, Steve.
I know. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
So the new book, which was the new Mr. Panda book, is Wash Your Hands, Mr. Panda. So this one I worked on last year, and it was just published in hardback. It was published, so it is out and available in the UK, and I think in some other countries too, in hardback. But it comes out in paperback, which is of course a slightly cheaper book. In paperback, you know, it's more a little bit cheaper, and it's than the hardbacks, which can be quite pricey. But this comes out in November. It comes out mid-November. Wash Your Hands, Mr. Panda. And I had so much fun creating this book. And of course, it's about hygiene. Now, interestingly enough, when the last Mr. Panda book came out, We Love You, Mr. Panda, so the one before this one, We Love You, Mr. Panda, came out March last year. I wrote a list of things, a list of ideas for the next book, because I was a little bit concerned that I might be running out of ideas for Mr. Panda. We got
What can
please,
you do?
thank you, patience, gratitude, the bedtime routine, and there's We Love You, Mr. Panda. So I wrote down what the next ones could be, and what could Mr. Panda explore next. And hygiene was in there, and that was before the pandemic. I wrote down personal hygiene, and then of course the pandemic happened, and we're still in the pandemic, and we all know how important it is, and always has been, you know, to wash your hands and to practice good hygiene. So I did this one last year, and it had just it's just been published. Anyway, I'll just show you inside real quick. So
Yeah. Bubbles,
so there are
bubbles,
loads
bubbles.
of bubbles, of course. Now, in this one, Mr. Panda has his donuts again.
He's got to have his donuts. A book would not be Mr. Panda without a box of donuts.
So Mr. Panda is giving away donuts. Once again, giving away donuts. And Penguin is with Mr. Panda. But please,
very sticky donuts then, Steve, are they?
Very, yeah. Please wash your hands first, says the Penguin. So this is Mr. Panda's take on personal hygiene. So what I love about these books, and Mr. Panda as a character, is I want to know how Mr. Panda is going to, you know, handle a subject, because in my mind, Mr. Panda has developed a life of his own and a personality of his own. So when writing this, I wondered, okay, how is Mr. Panda going to approach this? This wash your hands, Mr. Panda. It needs to be funny, but it also needs to be educational, you know? It needs to include when to wash your hands, why you wash your hands, how you wash your hands, what might go wrong if you don't wash your hands. So there's quite a few things that have to sort of be covered in there. Again,
it's not so easy, is it? You know,
the when, the why, the how. So anyway, so we have here. So Mr. Pan is offering donuts, and along come the characters, as you can see, and none of these characters have actually washed their hands. So, for example, the lemur is here, and Mr. Panda is asking the lemur, where's Mr. Panda? Mr. Panda says, "Hello, lemur, have you washed your hands?" And then lemur says, "No, Mr. Panda, but I washed my tail." And then penguin is there to remind lemur, "That's good, lemur, but remember to wash your hands after playing outside." So you wash your hands after playing outside, and of course, lemur's been playing outside and has washed his tail, which is a bit random and a bit silly. Then you've got Mr. Panda here asking the hippo if she's washed her hands, and she hasn't washed her hands, but her bottom is squeaky clean.
Oh, kids are going to love that, Steve. They're absolutely going to love that. Anything bottoms.
And it kind of carries on like that until eventually Mr. Panda explains the importance of washing your hands and asks the question, why hasn't anyone washed their hands? And explains that it's important to wash your hands, to wash away the germs, because germs can make you sick. How do you wash your hands? And it carries on, you know, talking about how to wash your hands. And it's all very fun. It's all very sort of silly.
Gigantic soap.
Yeah, it's all quite silly. And it ends with a little nod to Please Mr. Panda, the very first book. So it kind of, in a way, it kind of goes back round to the first book.
Yeah, I was going to say.
The way that it ends. So that's Wash Your Hands, Mr. Panda. And that one comes out real soon. And I'm really excited about sharing that book.
Oh, I'm so excited for both books. You Can and the Mr. Panda, Wash Your Hands. Oh, they look absolutely fantastic. Steve, I don't know how to thank you for sharing today with us your experience as a writer and illustrator, your new books that are coming out as well, and your most lovable character, Mr. Panda. I mean, he's just fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sure that teachers who are following this channel will find your thoughts and insights so interesting and so also useful when teaching their young language learners, especially your tips as well for writing their own stories with some multisensory prompts to give them ideas also of writing. So thank you so much again. Wishing you all the very, very best of luck and congratulations for the launch of your new 2 books. And
thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope to see you very, very soon. So thank you again, and take care. And to all of you who are watching, remember, be theatrical.